You are listening to INTERFORM Podcast with Ro on the radio. You're going to want to hear this.
Welcome to INTERFORM Podcast. It's me, your girl, Ro on the radio. I always say this, all the guests are special, but Randy Wilburn, I mean, this is a big deal to me because Randy has his own podcast and Randy is kind of a big deal. So Randy, tell everybody who may not know if they've been living under a rock or something, like who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you so much, Ro, for having me. It's great to be here at the INTERFORM headquarters, and so many cool things happening here in Springdale, right downtown. So shout out to all the impact that you guys are making in this community.
Thank you.
But it's beyond just Springdale. So you guys are doing some good things. But no, I'm Randy Wilburn. I'm the host of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. It's the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in the Ozarks. And the podcast is the podcast I would have wanted to listen to back in 2014 when I was thinking about moving here.
Really?
So that's the whole reason why I created the podcast. And now 3 years in, 183 episodes as of today.
Wow.
So
okay.
Yeah, so we're cranking them out. We're cranking them out and having fun in the process.
Well, good. I like that you created something that you wanted, and it's definitely taken off for sure. Everybody knows about the podcast. Like, for real.
Well, I won't know everybody, but we had you on the podcast, and we had a lot of fun telling some stories, and you shared your superhero origin story. So I appreciate you indulging me for a minute to just have a conversation. So
thanks for having me on. So this episode we're talking about colorism in the Black community, and the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because when I was on your podcast, we kind of like scratched the surface of it a little bit, and it was just so interesting. Yeah. And I wanted to definitely get your perspective on it. And so for people who don't know what colorism is, how would you describe it?
Well, I think in the Black community, there are, let's just say, long-held beliefs about the different color spectrums that African Americans come in. And so the closer you are to white, the more you're right.
The closer, white is right.
The closer you are to Black, the more they say get back. And so the reality is that this is a real issue, right? And
a current issue,
but it's also a historical perspective. I mean, when you look at all of the people that served in plantations, African slaves, more often than not, once miscegenation took place and you started seeing the real, just an onslaught of the mixing of the two races, you would have fair complected African American slaves that would be in the big house, as they say. Correct. And then you'd have, and then, the field workers, the big bucks and all those other folks, those would be folks that they would be in the fields, that would be working,
the hard
labor from sun up to sundown. And so, and then we get the expression, the tragic mulatto and all of these other expressions about the different colors that so many of us come in. And so, I always remind people, because my kids get knocked on this all the time. I have my oldest son, who's my pride and joy, Joshua. He's darker than me, a little darker than me. My middle son, Nathan, is lighter than my wife and I. And then my other son, Aiden, is somewhere in between those. And so a lot of times, they'll get asked by kids in their schools, hey, are you adopted? Or, is who's your father?
That's very familiar.
Yeah. Who's your father? Right. It's like, I'm like, no, I'm all those boys' fathers. So, but that's just that actually, when I say it, and the way that I think about it, Ro, is that it is the beauty of our race that we're able to create so many different complexions.
Correct.
But there are social challenges with that as well.
So let's get into I want to know about your experience, both past and present, with colorism. Like, how did you handle it as maybe someone under 18, and then how would you handle it as an adult? I didn't handle it well at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's always been, it's never really been a struggle. So I grew up in a household where my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, she basically looked like a white woman.
Same.
So every time I was walking down the street, they'd be like, whose child are you watching? Yeah. It's like, who does he belong to? Yeah. And so they would look at my hair now, and because my hair kind of implies that, okay, that
you got that good hair, you see?
And that's a whole nother topic, right?
Exactly.
Good hair and colorism, they're two peas of the same pod. But that's another issue that comes up. But no, my mom's got long, flowing, straight hair, and has green eyes, and I mean just the whole. I see the whole mixture in my family, but I grew up in a family where we have family members that pass for white. That's how white people look. I mean, they looked white. I had a great aunt, Ada. She just passed away a couple of years ago, but she was one of my favorite aunts. But she looked just like a white woman. But she was my Aunt Ada, and I could tell she was black. But I just had a different sense about it, when interacting with folks. And so, but I have family members now on the West Coast that pass as white people, and you would never know that they were black unless they told you.
Right. And so would you say your family members that passed for white people have had more opportunities growing up, more privileges, more acceptance in different social circles because of them being lighter?
Passing. Well, let's put it this way. One of my cousins became mayor of Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
So it doesn't get much more preference than that.
Exactly.
So yeah, and I have, and this was a direct descendant of my grandmother's, the same maternal grandmother I'm talking about. Her brother had a child that moved out to the West Coast, and then they had a child, and then that child was a mayor in Portland. So
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole group passes for white. And,
wow.
And I have a lot of friends. I went to Howard, the Mecca, and I have a lot of friends that have.
That's
family.
A big deal.
It is a big deal.
Howard.
That's how we roll. But it is an issue that I see in a lot of other families, and I have some friends that are originally from South Carolina, and they have a whole segment of their family that passes for white, but is actually black.
Absolutely.
And they don't really want any parts of it. Some do when they find out, but then a lot more often than not, they don't want to know.
Is there a disconnect between other family members who are darker that they think that they're better than everybody else, or they are bougie, or they act different? Because I noticed, like, in my family, I mean, I actually recently found out who my biological father was and my biological grandmother, and they are super basically white, like with green eyes. My grandmother looks like a white lady, but you can tell she's black because she wears wigs. You know what I'm saying? Not saying that white people don't wear wigs, but I'm saying you can tell. And there's always this disconnect between them and other family members. There's this perspective that they think they are better than us because they are, light skinned. And a lot of it's not even based in factual information or lived experiences. It's just a particular perspective. It's just that is, and what's weird is that other black people, other family members, they understand it, and so they just kind of take it as they're definitely telling the truth without asking about what experience led them to think that. So did you experience that, or did you hear other family members saying, "Oh, your cousins over there, they think they're better than us"?
I will say this. I think especially because the colorism issue, if it were to have ever come up, it would have been on my maternal side, on my mom's side, but most of them looked like, as we say, light, bright, and almost white. So
there it is.
So there really wasn't animosity between people, but we did have a few people that were darker complected, but nobody gave them grief, right? Because a lot of times they were darker complected, yet they still had straight hair or things of that nature. So again, those are compensating factors that when you're just looking on the surface, for some people, that's still acceptance, right? I mean, I've heard good hair all my life.
Same.
It's like that's just, oh my gosh, you got good hair. And I mean, I can still hear the girls in junior high school talking about, oh, Randy, he's different. He's got good hair. And I'm just like,
Randy got that good hair.
Yeah. So it's just like, hey, I don't know what to tell you, but there's never been a conk in my hair or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that's the reality that, you know, for a lot of people that want to have things a certain way, it's like, well, if I didn't get it naturally, I'm going to figure out a way to get it.
For sure.
And that's why the black hair industry is as big as it is.
Yeah. I mean, at that time, like we're going to say Jim Crow, and after Jim Crow, assimilation was pretty much necessary for the black community as far as trying to get a job.
Yeah.
Like we literally, our ancestors and our family members literally straightened their hair because we couldn't get a job.
Right.
Without it.
Yeah.
But now that we don't have to, I still feel like the colorism is very prominent. Like even we'll even say like 5 years ago on Instagram, there's a bunch of hashtags that are like team light skin, team dark skin.
Right.
We separate each other by skin tone and behaviors and mannerisms. It's like if they see a light-skinned woman acting crazy, it's like all light-skinned women are crazy, right? All mixed women are crazy.
Right.
All light-skinned guys are sensitive or overly sensitive.
Or soft.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think we realize how that can be not helpful.
It's not helpful at all.
To our community.
No.
And I don't think a lot of people understand that, you know, those have been projected on us since like you said, slavery times, because slave owners would dip their pens in company ink, so to speak.
Yep.
And the product of that is children, and so they would keep the children, as you say, in the house and closer to the masters.
Yeah.
But we still carry that on today. And my question is, I mean, have you experienced that as like an adult? Right. I have experienced that as far as even dating.
Yeah.
There are black men and black women, some, not all, who only date
certain types
and young and certain looks because they don't want their children to turn out dark. And I've heard that before. Or they don't want them to be bullied.
Right. Yeah. You know, I think that's a deeper seated issue. And, you know, I think a lot of times when people don't understand the black experience in America, the level of baggage that some of us carry, and we all don't carry the same amount of baggage.
True.
Is profound.
Yeah.
And that to me is that's the real conversation, right? Because I don't carry nearly the kind of baggage that some other people. I'm very comfortable in my skin. I'm very comfortable having, you know, multi-hued children, and that's not like an issue for me. And and we try to educate them the same way to be, hey, just be, you know, my son Nathan, he said his color is peach. That's his color, right? I'm just like, okay.
Beige.
Or beige, right? Yeah. And I'm like, no, I know you want to look at a crayon, a beige colored crayon, but no, if you want to think of a color, you might say peach. But I think it's just those are some of the challenges that as African Americans we face, and that baggage has a profound effect on our psyche. Yeah. It has a profound effect as in terms of how we present in the world.
Absolutely.
In our own community. Because like you say, team light skin, team dark skin. At Howard, there was certainly a lot of that. Colorism was rampant at Howard.
Yeah. And with black sororities and fraternities.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I had a young lady that was a very good friend of mine, who she pledged for a sorority, and I remember,
AKA if she was light skinned.
Well, she wasn't light skinned, but she still pledged for that sorority. But I remember her giving me her BMW convertible to hold on to because she didn't want her sisters to take advantage of her car situation. Okay. So, you know, there's always those kind of stories. And I dated light-skinned girls, and, you know, I dated dark. I didn't really care because, I mean, Howard was like, you know, we were like the United Nations of color. I mean, literally, it was like I don't know if you remember the United Colors of Benetton.
Yes.
I mean, it was just, we had black women of every spectrum. And so I was not it wasn't a struggle for me.
It wasn't a thing. It was for me in college. I went to TSU.
Yeah.
TSU is an HBCU. And I think that was the first experience I had with light-skinned people being seen as like a negative thing, because a gentleman who was African, like actually from Africa, not African-American, was basically telling me the reasons why he wouldn't date light-skinned women or women like me, because he felt like we represent basically the rape of our ancestors. Mm-hmm. And it was a very uncomfortable situation. I was like, imagine. I mean, you don't really need to tell me all this, but all right.
Yeah.
I think that was my first experience with it. And even black women at TSU at that time were not very nice to me. So it was always like she thinks she's better than everybody else. And I was like, first of all, I'm not even really that light. But it was a different experience. And I felt the need to assimilate in a different way. Like I had some identity things going on in college. I used to wear super long, straight weave, colored contacts.
Oh, man.
Come on.
Yeah.
I looked ridiculous.
That was the thing though back in the day.
I thought that's what guys wanted. And so I just, I did that and I definitely regret it. And I'm not going to show you no pictures. We're going to keep that. You know what I'm saying?
That's all good.
Just take my word for it. I'm accountable for my mishaps.
Sure.
But I don't think, and let's talk about the media, because I don't think the media is helpful either when it comes to colorism and the perspective. Because, for example, let's talk about Martin, right? Pam is the dark-skinned friend with the attitude.
Right, exactly.
Can't get a man, right?
Yeah.
And Gina went to a great college. She's educated. She's light-skinned, and she has a man, right? They even do it on, The Proud Family.
Sure.
Right? The dark-skinned friend is loud, and she's, kind of problematic and mischievous. Rough. And the light-skinned girl is educated and, gets all of the attention. So I think we do that. But is it like an art imitating life type thing? Maybe people who made these programs experienced this, and that's why they portrayed light skin and dark skin the way that they did.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, and as you think about that, I've been watching on lately Half and Half on Netflix.
Yeah.
And even there, where you have two young ladies that
they're biracial.
Well,
in real life.
Okay. But I mean, neither of them, they look like they could be family members of mine, but one is definitely lighter skinned than the other.
For sure.
And so it's like, even there, you see some of the favoritism that would go to the one child versus the other. And, and so that dynamic is quite interesting. And even the mothers of those two children who share the same dad, one's darker skinned and one's lighter skinned. So interesting. Yeah. So I think you see that, and that has played out over the years on Hollywood. Right. And so when you go way back and look at movies like To Kill a Mockingbird and others where you see black actors and, and it's like, wow, obviously Sidney Poitier and Cicely Tyson come to mind.
For sure.
And so it's like, I mean, we're talking like the cream of the crop in terms of thespians. I mean, these folks were, they were without parallel.
Absolutely.
In terms of their craft, but they were anomalies because of their color.
Exactly. Like, you guys want, okay, we got one black person. Like,
they ran neck and neck for years. I mean, they literally just died in the last few years, but they ran neck and neck for years as being, those folks that we had. And then I think what happened, Roots came on the scene in 1977.
Oh, Queen.
Changed a lot in terms of them showing all the different complexions that comprise the black familial experience.
Correct.
And so I think that was quite interesting to see. And I mean, it just opened up people's eyes to say I never knew.
Yeah. But well, I mean, you are obviously a professional in the radio world. Let's talk about your voice.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I have been told the same thing, that we talk white.
Right.
And
Brian Gumble, does that come to mind?
Exactly. But a lot of people and a lot of people in our culture will say things like that and say that we talk white without realizing that essentially you're saying that to speak in an educated way is white.
Right.
And to speak not in an educated way is Black.
Right.
And that is also harmful to our community. How have you handled that? I'm sure it doesn't happen that much anymore, right?
No, it happens all the time.
Shut up now.
I hear, I'm 53 years old and I still hear, it's 2022. I still hear, man, you well, they say it in a different way, right? But I used to hear, "Help, man, you speak so well," and I'm like, "Well, how the hell else should I speak?"
Yeah, because I'm not supposed to speak well if I'm Black.
Exactly. And I speak the way that I was brought up, right? And I didn't hear, I didn't hear people saying "fixin'." And when they were, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I didn't hear certain ways that the English language has been butchered in both races. So, I mean, my grandparents spoke the quote unquote the King's English, and it was never a struggle for them. And my grandfather, being a journalism and a broadcaster, he certainly spoke, his language, his first of all, his level of language and how he spoke was on another level. So I was just constantly inundated by that.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons why none of our 3 kids have an accent or anything like that, because it's what you hear in the household.
Absolutely.
That governs a lot of that. Right.
Yeah.
But yes, I've heard, oh, you talk different, or you sound, I haven't heard in a while that you sound white, but I have heard, but I know what people are saying when they say,
they mean.
Yeah, it's coded language. It's like, man, you sound a lot smarter than some of your peers look. And that's kind of what is intimated, but I get that. And that's fine. But I mean, yeah, it's just, I think it's part and parcel for the Black experience, right? It's like we're constantly on tour as far as, hey, this is who we are and this is what we are. And so every time you see somebody that's kind of stepping out of the zone and doing something that's extra special, it's like, well, what is it about this person? Who, what's going? Do you have some white in you or anything like that? So it's like, and that would be the question. Growing up, that was so girls would say, "Do you have some white in you?" And I'd be like, "Well, actually, if you go back, my grandmother's grandfather was an Irish sheriff in Kentucky.
A sheriff?
There's
a new sheriff in town.
Now, here's the thing. He didn't rape anybody. He married a Black woman.
Okay.
So there was a difference.
Yeah.
My grandmother.
Less traumatic history.
Yeah, less traumatic, but a different situation. And my grandmother's father was an itinerant pastor who was Black, but he was so fair complected. He basically, if you saw any picture, you'd say, "Oh, who's that white man?" He looked so white that he was able to travel around in the 1910s and 1920s.
That's unheard of.
As an itinerant pastor in the Midwest and do tent revivals to white people as a Black man.
Man.
So he didn't volunteer that, hey, I'm Black. It was like, I got to feed my family. I got to do what I got to do.
Sure.
That's a little different.
Right.
Than some of the other experiences that I've seen where people have just been like, I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to just go be white because, I can't. It's
easier.
Yeah, it's easier. And I can't say that if that opportunity were given to me,
at that time, especially.
Well, at that time, but if I was really light complected, like some of my cousins are, I don't know that I might not, see that. I might not, take a closer look at it. Right. I think if anybody that's listening to this, that's under the age of 30 probably never saw the skit that Eddie Murphy did on Saturday Night Live, where he dressed up as a white person and showed what it was like in a white world from his perspective. It's one of the top 5 skits ever on Saturday Night Live. Not only for it's super funny,
of course,
but it is super
accurate.
Engaging and super accurate. And it really said some very specific things about the state of our society and where we are as it pertains to color and the perception of color. And Eddie Murphy, and the long and short of it, just look it up. Just go to Google or YouTube and type up Eddie Murphy as a white man, and you'll find it. It's a Saturday Night Live skit, and it's just absolutely amazing. And he narrates the whole thing,
right?
And at the end of it, he said, "What I found out about being white for the time that I was white was that white people treat each other differently than they do if they know you're black. And, you know, they and then he started going through a litany of the different things that he experienced. And one of them was like, there was a scene where he went in to go buy something in the store. It was like a newspaper, and he was about to hand the guy the cash, and the guy looked at him, who was another white man who was the guy working in the store. He was the clerk. He said, "It's okay. Nobody's watching. Take it. Just take it. It's all good." Right. And it's like, so, you know, and so all of this really took Eddie Murphy's character by surprise, because he was expecting a different experience. And so I just think that was a really telling characterization of things. Not that that's the way that it is. I mean, but all the time. But there are some perceptions, whether false or not, that do exist. And, you know, it's like, how do we know, right? How do we know as African Americans how things are like? Because I mean, you see me from a mile away and you see that I'm black. Right. I just got pulled over going down to Dallas. And I know for sure, I looked on the ticket and it said, there's a box on the ticket now that says, did you know the driver was another color? What? And so you can mark off no or whatever. So he marked off no, because my windows are tinted. Well, my windows are tinted, so he wouldn't know.
That's how I know you black.
But exactly. So, but I just thought, I was like, man, I said, why this guy pull me over? Then he asked me all these questions. Of course, he didn't give me a ticket because I was doing nothing wrong. And he, you know, his whole thing was, you know, I didn't see you move your directionals. Okay. And I was like, dude, my directionals work. My car gets checked out. I don't ever leave my house without stuff working, you know?
Yeah,
and because so that's just the way it is. So I don't want to be that guy, you know, that stopped for some silliness. Exactly. So I always make sure that everything is working in my car. It's never a question. And if it isn't, I'm headed to AutoZone or wherever I need to go to get it fixed. And but I'm not fearful like that. I really don't operate. I just thought it was more amusing than anything that he took the time to pull me over. And then of course he asked me a million questions and, you know, the proverbial, where are you going? And so, and I always like Zetson people like that when they start asking you a lot of crazy questions. I'm going to the circus. No, well, I mean, I just told him some stories. And so he was like, well, where are you from? And I'm like, I live in Fayetteville. And he's like,
but where are you really from?
No. He didn't go there. He started asking me, because I told him I'm a podcaster. I'm headed to I was going down to Dallas to speak at a podcasting conference. And I made sure to tell him it's the largest in the world. And I left it at that. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, well, you know, and so he went on, and then he started talking about Northwest Arkansas. He's like, I don't know much about it, but I watched that show Fixer Fabulous with Dave and Jenny Mars. And I'm like, oh, I know those guys. I know Jenny. Jenny, you know, I've been trying to get her on my podcast for a while. We just can never get our schedules right, but they're good people. And, you know, I kind of left it at that, just kind of casually like, yeah, okay. Sure. And so, but I mean, that's like an everyday thing, right? People don't think about, and it's just like, these things happen. Yeah. And I think it's how you carry yourself in those moments, right? Yeah, you can pull out the Constitution if you want, but sometimes you're just better off just having a conversation and trying to engender, you know, some collegiality between you and whomever you're dealing with, so that there's nothing that needs to get elevated for any reason, because some people are just more nervous than others.
That's true. Yeah.
It's just, you know, it's just survival 101 for a black man.
It's a shame that we have to live our lives man. Like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the way that it is sometimes.
I see your point. Have your children experienced anything in school with colorism, whether that be from kids that are white or other races, or from other black kids?
Absolutely. From black kids, it's like, is your father white? They asked my son Nathan, is your dad white or whatever? And he's like, no, my dad's black. And so, you know, and then they've all gotten questions like that. My youngest son has green eyes. So, of course, he's gotten questions. Are you mixed? Do you have? And I'm like, nah, you know, it's just, I mean, green eyes are just a very rare subset of the eye color, right? And anybody can have green eyes, but they're just really rare. And typically they run in families. And so my mom has green eyes. Her grandkid has green eyes.
There you go.
It's just one of those things, right?
Sure.
But my
How do
grandmother,
they handle it though?
I mean, he does it well. Let's just say the youngest one knows he has green eyes. Okay. So, because everywhere we go, everybody, like, to a person, I don't care whether we're at Walmart or wherever, oh my God, your eyes are so beautiful. Oh. So he knows, but we have to check him all the time. And we're like, listen, you can have green eyes and still get pulled over by a cop. So
Facts.
I just want you to know.
That is absolute facts.
I just want you to know. So, and don't let it go to your head, right? They're just eyes. People care about what's in a person's heart and in your soul. So,
they don't care about that.
Well, I mean, I'm saying, the people that matter do.
The people that matter.
Yes, the people that matter do. So,
I agree
but
with
no,
you.
I'm constantly having conversations with them all the time about that. My oldest son, Joshua, got called the N-word in a basketball game out in, it wasn't in, I don't want to disparage Harrison because they already have enough issues to deal with, but he was kind of out going towards Cotter.
Okay.
And I can't remember the city that they were in, but, and the next time he had to go out there, I went out there with him, but I made a big stink about it because, that's the one thing that I think every parent, every African-American parent, or any parent of color, whether you're Latinx or wherever, you want to protect your kids from that being exposed to that for as long as possible. Because I grew up in a very diverse environment in Teaneck, New Jersey. I don't ever remember anybody calling me the N-word that with the ER at the end versus the A. There's a difference, and if I have to explain it, then so there is a much more different. There's a difference,
sure.
And so I didn't have that, but I know it exists. I know. I mean, we saw Ahmaud Arbery. Just a couple of years ago, lose his life over something like that. And so I just think that, I'm trying to raise my boys to not be so sensitive to that, that it impacts their judgment for a short period of time that could ultimately alter their life.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, you have a son,
I do.
It's like, hey, you
got
to pick and choose your battles.
For sure. When my son was super young, I would say like 6, 7, he had issues with colorism almost every day at school, at elementary school, from mostly black kids, but white kids as well.
Sure.
Where it's like, are you mixed?
Right.
And he's like, at that time, he wasn't really sure what mixed meant. He just knew that him and his friend is mixed, the friend that he had in elementary school. And he came home and he asked me, like, why are people asking me if I'm mixed? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe because your skin tone's a little bit lighter. And he said, well, my friend is mixed and he has the same skin tone as me, but his mom has yellow hair. I mean, he was 7, so blonde hair. And he said, I don't know what to say or what the difference would be. And it's kind of, it's hard because I don't want him to think about it as like something that he has to defend on a daily basis, especially at school where he should be focused on other things. But I think now that he's 13, he's a lot more aware of it, and it doesn't faze him as much as it would me. My son is a lot calmer than me.
Yeah.
He's a lot calmer than me, and he handles situations probably better than I do. I got a lot to work on.
I think that's the desire that every parent has, right? Is that whatever your
I want you to be better.
Whatever your ceiling is as a parent is their kid, that your children's floor.
Yes.
So they've got so much more to go, right?
Precisely.
Yeah. So
I'm not doing so good with it now. I feel like I said,
well, you're a human being. I mean, it is what it is.
I get sensitive. I mentioned dating. There are certain guys, like I said, who they always put it forward that they only date light-skinned women. And so that's kind of a put off because I don't want to be, no one wants to be fetishized. Maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe I should think. But it's still a factor as a 40-year-old woman. And I still get a little testy about it.
Yeah.
I might mouth off a little bit.
Well, let me ask you
this.
It's
not because I'm light-skinned.
No, I
it's
understand.
Because I'm irrational.
Understand. Well, I mean, and this is the conversation that my wife has with our boys. It's like, because, she asked them, well, what type of woman do you like? And they go into just saying, well, I like them this way or that way. And
racially ambiguous?
Yeah, well, and so, I think the challenge is that, I think especially for a lot of black mothers, right, is like, you want your child to see in their future spouse their mom in that way, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's like it's almost like you go counter to that if you go a different way. And I have mixed race marriages in my family in addition to everything else.
I feel like everybody does.
Yeah,
right?
I think everybody does now, and so I think that the reality is that Thank God for Loving versus Virginia back in '67 or
Which
whenever
I don't know,
that
it
was.
might get overturned.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but if that gets overturned,
Gee
then
whiz.
my man Clarence Thomas may have a problem. So, but that's a whole nother topic for another day.
He is a different guy.
Yeah,
I will
he
just
is.
say that.
He
is a
so,
different gentleman.
He really is. So
Yeah.
I got to say that we had one of the greatest jurists of all times in Thurgood Marshall, and then we just we totally went the other direction on that one. So you can fight me all you want from
your boy CT
from a legal scholarly perspective, but I just think that well, it is what it is. So, it is.
When I say your boy, I mean somebody you don't like.
Right. Yeah, it's not an endearing. It's not an endearing
No,
thing.
it's not an endearing trait at all.
But back to what we were talking about specifically on the colorism piece, and I think it's something that, because you asked me a couple of specific questions, it's something that people wouldn't be aware of. But there was the brown paper bag test, like go to parties and stuff. Like
you're brown, get out of town.
It didn't happen when I was at Howard in the 80s and early 90s, but my mom, when she was going to school at Bennett College and then to Virginia Union, both historically black colleges. Bennett College is an all-women's college in Greensboro, North Carolina, where they had a bunch of sit-ins, and that was my mom's first real experience with civil rights. She did sit-ins in Greensboro at the Woolworth and everything. So, but yeah, back in those days, they had parties that were specifically brown paper bag parties. If you were darker than that brown paper bag,
you ain't getting into the
you
party.
weren't getting into the party. If you were lighter than that bag, it was all
You're
good.
in.
And my mom was like right on the spectrum, but she always got in.
Yeah.
She always got in, but there were others that wouldn't get in.
Yeah.
And that is the reality. And I don't think a lot of people, when people hear that, did they pass the brown paper bag test?
Right. They don't understand what that means.
It is a real thing.
It is a real thing.
And it was used. It was a barometer that was used for acceptance.
Even in we'll say hip hop videos, right? Hip hop videos in the early 2000s, even up to now, all of the women of interest is what I will call them, or vixens. They are all racially ambiguous or light-skinned women. And I feel like that also, it just moves it forward. We never get past it because we keep coming back to these same, beauty standards that are European beauty standards. And so if we can just work on that, maybe it will get a little bit better. But before we go, because the air is off and I'm getting hot in this fake leather jacket. What do you want people to understand about colorism that they may not otherwise know? And this is everybody, because Black people experience it and dish it out.
Yeah.
All people of color, what would you want them to know about it?
I think first of all, I think people should be open to asking questions. Okay. And really having a conversation. And I'll just share this quick story as I end it. My grandmother, probably in about 1967, 68, this was before Martin Luther King died. She worked at a department store in Bergenfield, New Jersey. And the department store will remain nameless, but she worked there. They thought she was white until one day, my grandfather picked her up. And,
you told me that.
And two of the women there said, Mary, we didn't know you had a driver. She was like,
Stop.
a driver? She was like, that's my husband.
And she got fired.
And then she got fired like 2 days later. So, first world problems for Black folks in the late 60s in Bergenfield, New Jersey.
It's like Clayton Bigsby.
Exactly. True story. True story. But I just think, I think that as African Americans, when it comes to colorism, I think we need to be able to embrace the simple fact, as I said it earlier, out of Black comes all the colors of the spectrum. And you need to understand that. And so don't be so caught up from a colorism perspective about what color you are. And, that's just the beauty of how God made you, and I just think that people need to be aware of that. And I think that, certainly we should have these conversations. And I know that they're happening at the dining room tables of places. They're happening at cookouts, at the family reunion get-togethers.
Yes.
Especially in Black families. And then I have these conversations with my white friends where I explain to them, about it, and I tell them about my grandfather. I tell them about my grandmother, and the simple fact that I got people of every complexion in my family. I got folks that look just like you. Matter of fact, I got an uncle look just like you. Mess up their mind. You do, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is, and it's
you like my singing?
Yeah, I like that. I like that, and it's part and parcel of the Black experience here in America. There is no going back from that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're here.
Yeah,
we're here, and we ain't going nowhere. And I think that this whole conversation of colorism, I would hope, would take on a different tone. And it would take on a different space and wouldn't own so much space in our heads in terms of how we interact with one another. And I'm just speaking to other people that look like you and I.
Right.
That we don't need to get hung up on that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there was an expression that I would hear all the time: the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice.
The older the berry.
The older the berry too. So you could add that in there as well. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just like, hey, don't get hung up on that. But always ask questions. I think you should ask questions. And if you are a person of color and you're struggling in that area, you should talk to somebody that you have confidence with.
Sure.
That will have a good word for you, an affirming word or something to help you as you navigate the waters of your identity.
Yeah.
But it's important. And I'd encourage people, if you've never picked up a book before, to read James Baldwin.
Okay.
Just about any book, but The Price of the Ticket is probably one of the best books because it's an anthology of a lot of James Baldwin's work. And James Baldwin's documentary Black Like Me is absolutely amazing. So you want to. I mean, there's just so
educate yourself.
Yeah, you just gotta educate yourself, and I think the more that you do that, the more that you'll realize how great you are. And that's not throwing any shade to any other race or anything.
Right.
But I think as African Americans, it's a thing that we struggle with.
That's true.
We struggle with that.
That is true.
I just think it needs to be a simple reminder.
Absolutely.
And I have friends in the Latinx community say the same thing. They struggle with that because colorism exists in the Latinx community as well.
All communities,
so,
absolutely.
It does. So so it's what it is. But go out and do great things.
Exactly.
And don't get hung up on how you look.
1% better every day. I got a t-shirt. Don't be jealous because I'm not letting you borrow it.
Now you need to rock that t-shirt when you're like on the runway or something like that.
I'm going to tie it on the side. What do you mean?
Yeah, make sure you got it hooked up. So,
Well, thank you so much for being here, Randy. Tell everybody where you can be reached. You can podcast.
Yes, you can download the podcast on every major podcasting platform. It's just I Am Northwest Arkansas. A new episode drops every Monday. You can check us out at I Am Northwest Arkansas on Instagram, and you can check me out on just about every social media platform, including LinkedIn at Randy Wilburn. I'm easy to find, and I'd love to holler at you and chat if you want to go a little deeper on this conversation and you feel like buying me a beer or a cider at Black Apple, then we can sit down and talk about that and kind of go from there.
I like that. Yeah. Randy is that guy. That's INTERFORM Podcast. I'm Ro on the radio. Make sure you check out our website, www.interform.art. And you can find me on Instagram. It's RO_on the radio, all one word. Thanks so much, Randy.
Thank you. Peace.
You are listening to INTERFORM Podcast with Ro on the radio. You're going to want to hear this.